Hello, everybody out there. Hello. Yesterday I had the pleasure to talk to Travis McHenry from America, an occult tarotist. And today I have the great pleasure to talk to Geraldine Beskin, who is very deep into occultism, I could say, because she's the owner of a magic bookstore in London, perhaps the magic bookstore in London, Atlantis Bookstore. And I'm very happy that we made it together here, Geraldine. Hello.
Hello, I'm delighted that we made it, I must
Yes.
also admit. Yes, it's been a long time coming. Yes,
You
pleased to have
are
done it.
you are in the bookstore right now, right?
I'm in the bookshop at the moment
Yeah.
and I'm sitting by the desk, and behind me I've brought up a photograph
Oh, so we have
of A. Waite and Just Be Seen. They're
okay.
behind me there. And this bookshop was built in 1888, which is when the Golden Dawn Magical Society started, which was the first magical society that men and women could join as equals. In fact, the first person initiated into it was Mina Mathers, and she was just she was an art student at the time, and they didn't know what would happen to her if they did this medieval magic and weird stuff that they'd invented and just decided to do. So we're a Western magical shop, and we're three generations of us have owned the place. My father knew the original owner, who started the shop 103 years ago this month.
Wow.
And
This month.
it is a big record. And we're also the oldest independent esoteric bookshop in the world, because we've never had backers. We've always paid our own rent. We've always been fiercely independent of spirit as well. So when the first owner died, my father was a great friend of his, and so he bought the shop. Then I was here with my mother for many years. Then when she died, we sold it. And 10 years later, Bali and I came in just to see the old place, and we bought it back that afternoon, which
Wow.
came as a great shock to both of us. But we've never regretted it. And so we've been working together for 23 years now. So she knows nearly as much as me. I won't admit she does know nearly as much to me very often, but she does. She's a very good bookseller, a very good occultist, and a good woman.
So Bali is your daughter.
And she's my daughter. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
So just for everybody who to understand, your
yeah,
bookshop is very close to the British Museum, where
absolutely. We're in Museum Street.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
So many people from the Golden Dawn met in the British Museum, and
yeah.
I'm sure it's going to figure in what you're going to tell us soon about Waite and Smith. But you, before we start with this talk, um, you're having an exhibition right now next to in cooperation with the Warburg Institute, I think.
Yeah, no, we're in complementary to them. They have a brand new, their building has had £14 million spent on it. And finally, they have an exhibition space. And wonderfully, because they house the originals of the Thoth deck up there, they decided to have an exhibition. And so we lent some things to it. We have other things that we thought were good enough to be in it, but they had no space for them. So we've done a complimentary exhibition. And the agreement seems to be, from people who've been to both exhibitions, that they are the minimalist, pure, beautifully lit, grown up version, and we are the maximalist version of the tarot, which is satisfying the readers and the tarot users in a very different kind of a way.
Yeah.
Um, we have printing blocks from the Book of Thoth. We have an Atelier deck, which by doing a lot of research on it, I've dated back to not later than 1820. We have 68 of those 78 cards on display. We
Wow.
also have our own Pam A deck of the Rider Waite Smith deck, and that's really what I will be talking about today. That particular deck and the man who created them. So much is now known about Pamela Colman Smith, the artist, but who was the man behind it, really? He's become quite a shadowy figure. And he
Yeah,
seems to be quite a sweet man. Now I've looked into him more thoroughly, he seems to have been a very nice chap. So yeah, so that's where we're at. So and the, and we but the room that our exhibition is a very famous one amongst the witches, because witchcraft was illegal in England till 1951, and we had a clandestine coven downstairs in the room for years.
really.
But yeah, but it was Gerald Gardner's coven, who is
Oh,
the grandfather of modern day witchcraft. And
yeah.
even once witchcraft was legal, his coven carried on meeting here. So very famous room, very important room.
So people who watch our channel have heard of Gerald, because we did a talk on him. Christopher did a talk on him. So if you want to know more, you can listen to that. But the Atlantis bookstore, for everybody who hasn't been to London for the exhibition yet, is quite small. But I think it's
Yeah.
down in the cellar you have the exhibition, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes. And that's where we hold workshops and tea with a medium. We have a
yeah,
spiritualist medium who works here and things like that. So it's a busy little room, but it's exclusively for the tarot exhibition
yeah.
for the next couple of months.
So it's
Yeah.
really a must to visit when you're going to London, even if you're not going to the Warburg Institute for the exhibition. The exhibitions that for of the Warburg Institute and yours finishes end of April.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
And we're
have
only a
to.
10-minute walk away from each other. That's the nice thing.
Okay,
You know,
yeah, exactly. It's
it's
quite close. Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it works
you
quite
can
nicely
walk
for people.
through the British Museum to the Warburg Institute.
You could literally do that. You could absolutely could do that. It's a straight line. And then
Yeah,
at the end of the street here, you could turn right and that'll take you to Oxford Street. And so you
yeah.
can do
Do the
your shopping
big
after that.
shopping. Yeah,
Yes,
excellent.
yes.
And
Yeah, we normally have a large tarot um, section here with over 200 decks. We rather pride ourselves on that. And then yesterday, somebody rang from America who has no interest in the tarot and has no awareness of the exhibitions or anything, but needed them for a media project today. They'd been badly let down by they'd commissioned something, they'd been let down. So they decided they needed 200 tarot decks. So we opened every cupboard we'd got and every drawer we'd got, and we supplied them from 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon till noon today. We supplied them with 200 tarot decks. So
wow.
don't come this week. We've got nothing in stock. We've got nothing left.
You sold all your, well, that's excellent though.
Sold everything. It
Yeah.
was fantastic. It was marvelous.
That
Yes,
that sounds like a bit of good luck. Um,
yes, it was. Thank you. Yes.
yes, and when you started to talk about Pamela Colman Smith and Arthur Waite, you're quite right. During the past years, much has been talked about Pamela, and Arthur has been a bit neglected. I
Yeah.
remember I have read one biography of his by Gilbert, I think
Yes. Yes.
he was
Yes.
called, which was
Yeah.
quite interesting, but I have read it, I think, 20 years ago or so.
That's
So,
it. It's been out of print a long time. But I was talking with one of the big publishers just yesterday about maybe bringing that back into print,
yeah,
which would
I have it
it's
down in my cupboard actually, in
yeah,
German. It has been
right.
translated into German.
I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah. So, yeah, we have to pick it up again, but I'm very curious to learn from you more about Arthur E. Waite, and I'm
yes,
sure everybody who's watching is also curious. Geraldine
good.
is very chatty, has a lot to say, and if you have any questions, just pop them into the commentaries, and I will try to ask them, Geraldine. When she's in the flow, she's hard to stop.
I'll be happy to be interrupted, I'm sure.
No,
So
I'm
it
just
all
kidding.
started off with people were talking about Pamela Colman Smith, and I was too. And for 35 years, I've had a long run of a very dusty magazine called The Occult Review.
Yeah.
Right?
Other way
Well,
around.
hold
Yeah.
on,
That's,
get
yeah.
into which way around I'm going. The Occult Review. And if I can I just get used to this, on this one, yeah, it has the first ever article about the Pamela Colman Smith Rider-Waite deck. And this was dated December 1909. And it was written by Arthur Waite, and he called it the Tarot, the Wheel of Fortune. And inside, we have a Pam A deck. The deck was produced for sale for Christmas 1909. By the middle of March the next year, they'd only done a few just to see how it went, and they'd sold out. So they reprinted. And so you now have what we call the Pam A and the Pam B decks, which were,
Pam A is meant to do with Pamela.
It's short for Pamela Colman Smith. It refers to her, and so that was done in 2 versions.
Mm-hmm.
And they both had the same back, which is this, like they call it. I'm going to get used to this eventually. That is the back, right? And that's called the cracked earth back. And on Sunday, I opened a book that was published in 1905. These were done in 1909. And I found that the end papers, these bits, right, were done using that same paper.
Oh.
So that back wasn't designed for those cards. And I said to Bali, I think I'm the only person in the world who knows that right now. So it's a world exclusive for you, Kirsten.
Thank
Nobody
you very
knows.
much.
Right? So there. Isn't that these things excite me?
Yeah.
People laugh at me when I say my 2 addictions are research and carbs. I love them both. But things like little discoveries like that really, really, really excite me. And they help place the cards again in proper time and space. So now, using our Pam A deck, this is the first image that anyone... keep going.
Just focus onto the camera. There you have a camera. Just hold it in front. Right. Yeah, that's it.
This is the first image that anybody ever saw of the Waite-Smith deck.
One of my favorite cards.
Yep. Isn't that fabulous?
I love it.
Yep. So it was in the article, and then there were 4 other cards which were larger than life size. Black and white drawings again, but if you have your cards handy, this is quite nice because you can relive this, you can recreate this history now. So we start off with the 8 of Pentacles.
So everybody can get their Waite-Smith deck out and recreate the first reading of the cards, right? Okay, 8 of
Pentacles.
8 of Pentacles. It will take me some time, but I have.
I can revisit this if you like.
No, I have a sorted deck. It's okay.
Okay,
I'm listening.
Right, 8 of Pentacles, and then 4 of the majors. So the 4 that were used were the Fool.
Mm-hmm. Just wait. I can change something for us here.
Why can't I do this?
Just hold on. You don't need to fight anymore. I can do it like this.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have the original here, but I have another version.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the Fool.
Yep. Then the Magician.
The Magician.
Yep. Then the High Priestess.
Yes.
And the Sun.
And the Sun. Okay.
Yes.
I will put them. Okay. I look at them in a smaller version, but you can. I can't see you anymore. Sorry about that.
No, my camera's gone. I don't know why.
No, it's my fault. I just bring you back. I hope. Just hold on for a second.
Yeah.
There you are. Voila.
Good. So the Sun card, there's been lots of debate about whether that extra line at the top of the Sun was a later addition, whether it was meant to be there or what. You see,
there's a top line.
Yeah, she alternates the rays of the sun. with a squiggly one and a straight one. Do you see? And that's still on the cards today.
Ah, you're right.
Usually,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it shows it was always there. I think it was a simple artist's mistake that they realized too late and just never ever were able to correct.
That's something I discovered when I looked at the Voss originals, that there are tiny little mistakes in the originals which have been erased through printing.
Yep.
But she made quite a few, yeah, she erased quite a few things and put color over it, and you can't see this when you have the cards in your hand. That's I found really interesting. So could be here the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting there again.
Yeah, yeah.
So these cards were printed in the Occult Review. Did I understand
They
this?
were printed for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the following April 1910, we have the first ever advertisement for it. Again, on the back of the Occult Review this time. And
Yeah,
that advertisement was used for many years, actually.
yeah,
And throughout the periodical, it's sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's inside, sometimes it's a little box. It just depends on how the cards were going. So the next card we need is the King of Wands. But again, there is so much detail in these that you, from whichever deck you have, you'll see has become altered. Things, it's just the way of life, really. Sometimes it's done deliberately, sometimes it's done because it's expedient to do it like that.
yeah. So
So
this
the King of Wands, yep,
this was printed as well in the magazine, The King of
yeah,
Wands?
yeah.
Okay. So I put
The
them
Queen of
underneath
Cups,
this, underneath.
yep,
Okay.
yep. The Queen of Cups,
Queen of Cups.
yep.
So as you can hear, Geraldine has a cough, but she has been
Yes, I'm
quite
sorry.
ill, and she was very kind to come today because she had we had problems finding a date. Thanks again, Geraldine.
Yes, it's my pleasure. And he said, if I can find my note.
The Queen of Cups has disappeared, but keep
Right,
talking. I will
okay.
find her.
Yeah. Then the Knight of Swords.
Queen of Cups and Knight of Swords.
Yeah, there's such energy in that horse, in that
Yeah,
forward leading stance.
I
Real
can't
power
find
in
them
it.
both. Just keep on going. I will find the
Yeah,
card.
yeah. And then the Page of Pentacles.
Page of Pentacles. Queen of Cups.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any more cards going to?
Yeah, then there's the Six of Wands. Five of Cups.
No, Page of. There. Oh.
Once you've done it, you've got it. You can take a quick photograph of it and then you'll...
Yeah, I will do it differently because I haven't sorted them and I need to.
Right, okay.
So, well, just one more. I have the king, the page of.
Of Wands. No, Page of Pentacles.
Yes, page
Yeah,
of Pentacles and the Knight of Swords
yeah,
before that.
yes.
And sorry, what was then? Six
Then
of.
it's the Six of Wands.
I've got the Six of Wands here actually.
Yeah.
And I'm still missing the Knight.
All right.
He has
How about the
disappeared.
Five of Cups?
Knight and Five of Cups. Okay, got it.
Yeah. The Eight of Swords.
The Eight of Swords.
Yeah.
Yes, got it.
Yeah. And then the Nine of Swords.
Ooh, nobody wants that one.
No. And it makes it a very, very, very strange reading.
Yes.
Because that is what it is. These aren't the obvious cards. You'd think that he would balance out the suits. Where are the pentacles in that last set of cards?
Yeah.
They're just not there to be seen. So he said that the fool stands for the joy of life before it is embittered by life on the material plane. It's the soul aspiring to higher things. Then the magician is the spark of heaven, has fallen from him, and he uses power from above as well as below, the spark of illumination. The high priestess, she's called the house of God, the sanctuary of the secret tradition, the great mother. The sun represents light and revelation. And then he goes on to interpret the minor cards. And he says, the King of Wands, because it makes sense that he showed the four strong majors. Absolutely, they set the scene for, how the cards are going to look. They look bold, they look dramatic, they look very interesting, and they look very different to the Marseille or any of the few others that people would have had access to until then.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he goes into the court cards, fair enough. He goes through the courts, that's fine, makes a lot of sense. And then the next page is this weird reading. So you have the King of Wands, who's ardent, equitable, noble, represents goodness blended with severity. The Queen of Cups, love and devotion, the images of which she sees in visions in her like visions in her vessel, in that great cup she holds. She holds visions of the past, the present, and the future, really. The Knight of Swords, Galahad on the quest for dispensing enemies. That's really interesting. That, the purity of his heart will win through to that extent. Page of Pentacles, a youthful figure looking at a talisman which hovers over their hand. This really typifies a scholar, but he also brings news. Then we go to the gloomy page, the miserable page, with the Six of Wands, which is crowned with hope and confidence. Yeah, agree with that. Five Cups, heritage diverted, and life empty of joy. Man, why choose that? Eight Swords, disquietude, conflict, crisis, sometimes fatality. And then the last one, the Nine of Swords, it's the card of disappointment. Which is well illustrated by the picture. They are his own words for this first ever reading of the deck.
So,
But in the article, sorry, carry on.
and I just need to understand again. He wrote an article presenting the deck, and
Yes.
for the first time did a reading and put the
Yeah.
reading into the paper.
Yes.
And then
these are his meanings. Absolutely,
okay.
his meanings taken from that.
And what was the question for the reading? Just to see how the book will be selling, or
yeah, how the cards will be received, really.
okay.
In the article.
Okay, so now I get it.
It seems kind of clear that his attitude towards it was that it came from above. It came from a divine spark. That they then did the work on it, that they've now birthed it and given it to the world, and they're not interested in the money.
Yeah.
So, but as I say, why they chose to have those last four cards in is a bit of a mystery, really, because they're not. I'm so sorry about this. They're not positive in any way.
So was it a reading where he drew the cards blindly, or did he choose the cards?
No, he effectively edited that magazine. He did everything for it.
Yeah.
His day job was that he worked for a malted milk company called Horlicks, which was huge at the time, absolutely huge. But he also wrote over 40 books. He rewrote books for people. He edited books for publishers. I mean, he wasn't always paid. I mean, quite often, like publishers do, they just blatantly lied to him. But he was always very, very, very busy with things. But the Occult Review was dear to his heart. And when the owner was away, He edited it. He ran the letters page. He read all the reviews. He did the roundup of what. Sorry, I'm going to have a cough
I'm so
sweep.
very
A
sorry.
roundup of what other magazines was esoteric magazines were saying every month, and he wrote articles for it, and he collected the articles in for it every month. So it was in his charge, basically. And he just came up with this weird thing. He didn't do it by accident.
Mm.
It must have been, they must have really meant those cards to be there. But I think maybe it was, I don't know, that they were not going to get any money from it, maybe.
Well,
Pamela
they
Colman Smith got paid £7.
£7
You know,
only.
yeah, yeah.
And how much did he get from it?
I doubt that he took anything from it.
Oh,
I really do doubt that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so all the
yeah.
money went to the writer publishers.
To the publishers, yes.
Wow.
And the Ryder Publishing House was set up about 1900 by somebody who was an Oxford graduate, and he just had some money, and that was it. But then there's a boring periodical called the Timber Trades Gazette. And month on month on month, it lists how much timber has been sold in which country and where it went, and what the trends in timber are, and where there's no water, so the trees are dying, and all the rest of it. Very, very, very dull. It's all statistics. But at the end of printing that, there was always excess paper. So somebody else, who was the Honourable Ralph Shirley, he bought it, bought the Timber Trades Gazette, started up the Occult Review, and because he was interested in it, and it didn't cost him anything to produce because it was all spare paper that it was printed on.
It's amazing. So
And
was
he
he
got, sorry,
what was this person in the Golden Dawn as well, or?
no, he was interested in all these things,
Mhm.
but I haven't traced him back far enough or properly enough, really. He knew everybody, though, but he was the guy who was going out to dinner with people, leaving Waite to do his second job, after his real work, which was quite busy enough, in the form of producing this magazine on time every month. But Waite said of the cards, everybody knows that it is a method of divination by cards and that they're used for fortune telling. And in this article, he recommends the recently published Manual of Cartomancy by Grand Orient, which was a pseudonym of Waite himself. He
Yeah.
had rewritten it, and he never told anybody that. And it went into many editions and all the rest of it, and people speculated about who Grand Orient was, and he never told them it was little old him. And the other one was the Tarot of the Bohemians by Papus, who was translated from the French, because Waite had just translated and published that. So again, he's pushing his own wares to that extent. But again, he wouldn't have got much for them. We're talking pennies. We're talking. It's not the big bucks like it often is for people these days. And he also produced a key to the tarot, a very small book,
Yeah.
to accompany these cards by Pamela Colman Smith.
Yeah.
But he says that the tarot, in this article, he says that the tarot is in the air. It's not quite ready yet, although the cards have been hard to find until now. That people have been talking about the tarot, they're becoming increasingly interested in it. But this particular deck's not around. And he said, I have embraced an opportunity which has been somewhat of the unexpected kind and have interested a very skillful and original artist in the proposal to design a set. He approached her.
Yeah.
Right? Miss Pamela Colman Smith, in addition to her obvious gifts, has some knowledge of the tarot values. She has lent a sympathetic ear to my proposal to rectify. My apologies. She has lent a sympathetic ear to my proposal to rectify the symbolism by reference to channels of knowledge which are not in the open day, and we have had other help from one who is deeply versed in the subject. So there's a third party in this. We have Waite, we have Smith, we have his deep esoteric knowledge, we have her familiarity with the tarot, and then we have somebody else pulling the strings as well. There is a supposition that that was that was W.B. Yeats, but so far that's not really been rectified. It's just that everybody knows he was interested in the Golden Dawn. He was a member of the Golden Dawn for 40 years. Everybody knows he was interested in symbolism and the tarot. But I don't know who the third person was. On the
So,
card, he says, yeah.
how, what was the thought behind creating this deck from Waite's point of view? Do we know that?
He just translated the Papus. He just translated the Grand Orient. And I'm so sorry, excuse me.
I'm so sorry.
And he knew from he was a member of the Golden Dawn, a magical society. And he was more of a mystic than a magician always. But he knew that people were working with the tarot. And back in the day, they used mainly the Marseille deck, or they painted their own under instruction. And they used to have to be imported from France, so it tended to be the Marseille that they used, and he just felt it needed refreshing.
Oh my God.
Sorry, this is very unpleasant for you. I really am sorry about this.
No, it's perhaps you're supposed not to tell us. It's a curse.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, because the magical groups, the Theosophical Society at that time had a practical side to it. They were very interested in what was happening and how these things worked. And fortune telling has always been a way for people to pay the rent, and it's always been very, very popular. And this is 1909, 1910, so we weren't at war with anybody. We had no great difficulties going on, and there was it was genteel. It was a leisurely thing to do to some extent, but the interest in magic was growing and growing. The Golden Dawn had 330 members by then, which is quite good going for a brand new magical order. You had the esoteric masons. There was a lot of reason why he thought there was a market there. And again, producing the cards wouldn't have cost them much because they own the means of production. So they could have just been done on the back of a run of something else.
So, since he didn't obviously want to earn a lot of money with it, he wanted to bring the cards to the people to
Yeah.
get the tarot spread in the world.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very definitely. And he seems to have a fondness in his autobiography and things like that. He seems to have a great fondness for Pamela Colman Smith. And also, she was interesting because she was well travelled. She had bits of information to bring in from here, there, and everywhere, really. And she was also quite a fast worker. She produced a lot. She was used to hand colouring things and so on. And then, like lots of people who produce tarot cards, they suddenly think, oh my goodness, 78 of anything is a lot to produce. I'm getting bored with this, And she got £7, which was very good money. It was something like £40,000 in today's money.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know this. So she was paid not badly
She
for
was
it.
very well for the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Good.
she, and also there was no time limit. They'd been working on it for quite some time. He didn't hustle her for, to get them done because he knew that she travelled, that she was here, she was there. So, yeah, so I would like to know who the other person is. So would you like to know who Mr. Arthur Edward Waite is? Would that?
Yes, of course.
Yes,
So
yes.
I just monitored there are no questions asked.
Oh,
So
yes.
you all understood, just for the Germans to understand, you all understood. We got the first original reading with a Waite-Smith deck. We can discuss this later in our forum, perhaps as well. And we know a bit why the deck was done, but now we are learning some biography of Waite. I'm very
Yes,
curious.
yes. So he was a scholar of the esoteric, and he was a practitioner of the occult as well. He was born in America, in Boston. His father was a sea captain, and his mother seems to have married for love because she came from a respectable English family. But she loved her sea captain, and she went to and fro America with him 12 times. And when she was pregnant with Waite's sister, the father was lost at sea. And so the daughter was born 3 days later. And she eventually came back to England. And her family didn't want to know her. And so the long supposition was that they hadn't been married. But this was the days before computers, and R.A. Gilbert, who wrote a biography of Waite, said that he seems to have been illegitimate because he looked through 10 years or 12 years of marriage licenses in America and in England, couldn't find anything. Once Google was invented, somebody found that his parents had indeed been married for 12 years before they had him. So tormenting, so tormenting. So he came back to London with not much money and not much hope. And his sister was quite sick, and in her teens, she died. And his mother just was so bereft. They moved so that she could sit at her window and see her daughter's grave from her living room window. She was so upset. So she'd become a Catholic, and that meant that he got 2 terms of schooling. That's all he ever had. But he was very clever. He was very bright. And he read and read and read and read and read. But after the daughter died, his mother became a spiritualist. And he got that. He understood that. He liked that. But he was also a teenager and he wasn't prepared to settle to anything, which is more than fair. But he did like trash novels. He did like rubbish magazines. And he was the first person to say, these things are an important part of of our culture. These things should be preserved. These things should be in museums. These are like they were like the pulp zine, the punk zines of the 70s, you know. So he collected them and kept them all his life. He wrote for them as well quite extensively to, again, help pay the rent. And when he was an old man, he lived at the seaside, and he still had all these big collections of penny magazines. So he had them all wrapped up in brown paper and tied up with string and hanging underneath the floorboards of his house, because he lived at the seaside and the floor was always very damp down in the basement. So, but he kept a lifelong interest in them. And he was quite a sweet guy.
Which seaside did he live?
He lived in Ramsgate on the Kent coast.
Okay.
And so as I say, he kept that up for quite some time. Oh yes, and then he fell in love. In his 20s, he fell in love. And I'll show you who he fell in love with. Hold on a minute. He fell in love with her. Whoops.
Oh, she looks pretty. Interesting hair.
She was pretty,
Yeah.
and she was bright, and he had simply adored her. And they were found in a passionate embrace at 8 o'clock one morning by a maid. And they both said, oh, no, we weren't up to anything. We were drunk. It was better to say you were drunk than you'd spent the night together.
Okay. What was her name?
Her name was Theodora. well, her name was actually Annie, but he said there was no earthly loveliness to compare with that of Miranda, as he called her, with her red gold aureole of waved hair flowing down almost to her ankles, and her star-born eyes with heaven's grey blue had glorified, which heaven's grey blue had glorified. He had it bad, I tell you, right? So she was actually called Annie, and she was working as a governess in the house of, a very comfortable middle-class family called the Stuart Monteiths, who were so lovely and so gentle about things, they couldn't even agree on how to spell their own name. They didn't want to upset each other, right? They were those kind of, we've got plenty of money and we just drift here and we just drift there and all the rest of it. And they had things like a nice house in the country. Nice big house in the country. Yeah?
Wow.
And so, young Annie, who was the daughter of a gardener, she said, look, Arthur, I love you madly, but I've got the offer of marrying Stuart Monteith, and he can keep me in the life of luxury. So for now, I'm going to have to put you in the friend zone, as it were, right? We can still see each other, but after I'm married. But, I've got to put you in the friend zone for now. So he was so upset, he did the next best thing, and he married her sister.
It's a bit
As you do.
like with the Yates, isn't it?
Yeah.
She looks nice as well.
She was nice,
Yeah.
but very different in character. Right? So, so she became known, Annie became known as Theodora Stuart Monteith, or Dora, as she was more commonly known. And he married her sister Ada, the lady there. Now, she seems to have been Ada seems to have been quite dull. She had no real interest in his interests at all. She kept contact with her sister because she had a nice house in the country. Poor old Arthur Waite was still working hard. And in West London, there's the most gorgeous suburb called Bedford Park, and it was being built at the time. And you could just go along to the builders, and he had catalogues of what sort of chimneys would you like, what sort of gable ends to your house would you like, what sort of fireplace, what sort of windows would you like. But it was a bohemian, artistic, creative community that was buying there. Because the tube trains, the underground trains had just arrived, and it was a really groovy place to live. And this individual houses appealed to them very, very much. So all his mates lived there. A lot of the Golden Dawn people lived there. It's still very much intact as an area in London. But poor old Arthur and Ada, they lived just outside it. He was never in with the in crowd. He was a hard-working, working-class man. Very civilized, very pleasant, very tweedy, but they were just outside it. Then they had a daughter called Sybil, who he loved very, very much, and she loved him all her life. But as I say, Ada, he didn't really get it. He also liked going drinking with people like Arthur Machen, who wrote lots of spooky ghost stories and things. And they invented silly drinking clubs for themselves where they had to play stupid games, just like young people do, basically. So he had quite a fun time. And then he published endless streams of articles. He worked for Horlicks, as I say, as a manager, which was a very time-demanding job in turn. But also, at heart, he was a poet. And he studied alchemy, Kabbalah, and the Holy Grail primarily. He also took a great interest in cards. He liked the cards himself. So this handbook of cartomancy was always being redone by him as his own interest developed. He would improve it with each edition. And then he where am I? Oh, the other thing about him was, well as writing poetry and 40 odd books, some of them were about fairies. He absolutely adored fairies, completely believed in them, interact, interacted with them, and just thought they were completely marvelous. And and I think he rather saw his Dora as a bit of a fairy as well. Really, so. Um, where am I next? Oh yes, and then he decided to join. He joined a breakaway section of the Theosophical Society, and another, and so he joined the Golden Dawn in 1891.
How old
Magical
was he
Order.
then? He was
Oh
in the
gosh,
he was born in the
I
50s,
should
I
know this.
think. So he must have been
Oh,
around
gosh, I haven't got
40
that.
or something.
I'll work that out. I'll
Yeah,
work that
don't
out
worry.
later.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah. And he joined the Golden Dawn, which was set up in 1888. So it was only 3 years old, and that's his joining form.
Wow. Nice
Right.
handwriting.
So yeah. But he was always more mystical than magical. Alistair Crowley was really, really rude about him. He used to call him wisdom while you wait and say how dull he was and so on. He was dull in some ways. His books are very convoluted in the way he wrote them. And he was trying so hard to explain a difficult point that he made it even more difficult. But Crowley acknowledged that because of his publications and because of the goodness of what he did, he deserved every accolade that he could have. And also he resented Waite, and because he was successful, his stuff was always in print. Crowley's wasn't, and the difference between them was that Crowley was a magician, where you don't have to have a spiritual inner life. As a magician, in some ways, you are repeating recipes. It's a formula. If I do this at this time with this incense and this color and that purpose, and 3 hairs from a black cat, then this should happen. With the mystic, you go deeper, you go inner. And Crowley was never particularly good at that. And that was the difference between them. It's still the difference, really. The mystics are the seekers, the magicians are the finders. Magicians don't have gurus, they don't have masters, they don't have that much faith in anybody other than themselves. So anyway, it was a huge divide, but Crowley was very rude about him, but very admiring of him as well. So that was good. So he joined the Golden Dawn, and 3 years after it had started, really. He joined in 1891, resigned in 1893, and rejoined. Hold on a minute. Rejoined in 1896.
Why did
And
he
it was
leave?
because mystical work followed, he preferred his mystical work to the magical work, really. But also the Golden Dawn had fights within it, very famous fights. And they needed someone who was steady like Waite to actually carry on with the order.
Yeah. So he left the Golden Dawn because it was too magical for him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he set up his own order.
Okay.
Which was a much more mystical one. And Pamela Colman Smith joined that.
But it was still under the it was still Golden Dawn, but it was a kind
it was Golden Dawn-ish, but more mystical.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when he joined the Golden Dawn in 1891, he said to his wife, "Look, if I'm not back by midnight, they're so secretive about all this," he said. I've sort of learned little bits about who's who and what's what. But if I'm not back by midnight, get hold of Scotland Yard and sound the alarm. They've just been so silly about this. I can't bear it. It's It's like when Crowley joined, this great secret society, you mustn't tell anything about anything. And the first thing you had to do was learn the Hebrew alphabet. Well, that's not a great big secret, for goodness sake. So they took themselves very, very, very seriously. But one of the people who wanted him readmitted was Annie Horniman, whose family set up the Horniman Museum. I do a big talk on her. She's been fascinating me for the last year.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful woman.
Yeah.
And she and Pamela Colman Smith and Florence Farr, all GD members at this, Golden Dawn members at this time, they worked for William Morris's daughter, May Morris, as embroiderers over near in Hammersmith, which is near Bedford Park. And they were all so excuse me, such fine embroiderers that they were paid £1 a day each. Now that was money. That was quality. So that sewing side of Pixie hasn't been thought about particularly, but there she was. Just imagine May Morris, Florence Farr, Pixie Smith, and Annie Horniman. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Wow.
So, as I say, the Golden Dawn fell apart as all groups do. And she joined the Pamela Colman Smith. Oh, Arthur set up his own order, which was the Stella Matutina, or the Morning Star, and Waite's independent rectified rite grew from it. And the Stella Matutina was magical, and Waite's mystical one suited Pamela Colman Smith better, because she was very much a free spirit. And she came and she went and she drifted and so on. The regimentation of the orderliness of magical orders don't appeal to artists. It's a temperamental thing
Yeah.
as much as anything else, really.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite for her. So again, that friendship carried on for quite some years in that way. And she moved from the outer order to the inner one in April 1904. And that's the year that Aleister Crowley received the Book of the Law. And Waite talent spotted her as the person to give public expression to the symbolism and ideals of the order through the tarot cards that they went on to create. Her motto was Quod tibli id aulis, which means whatever you would have done to thee, which means I submit myself, I surrender myself to what you want to do.
Yeah.
He directed her to produce a deck with an appeal to the world of art and a suggestion of significance behind the symbols, because he could supply the answers to all of that. But he needed her visually. And she left the order when she became a Catholic and largely faded from view, as we know. Then, her life took a different turn. So he carried on, and his daughter Sybil grew up and was devoted to her dad and very heavily involved with his orders. There he is as a nice middle-aged man, and you can see how comfortable they do look together. Always magical, always overworking. His wife died, and Sybil became his constant companion then, really. And when he was so he was running his orders, he was working too hard, all the rest of it. When he was 59, he and Ada moved to Broadstairs, which is to Ramsgate, on the Kent coast, to live by the seaside there. And his wife died in 1924, and he and his daughter moved to Betsy Cottage, which is in Broadstairs, which is just along the coast a little. Now, until fairly recently, you could stay in Betsy Cottage as an Airbnb. And I was talking to Kim Arnold from the UK Tarot Conference today, and the man who owns it has got a long-term tenant in there currently, which is disappointing for us, because I'd always intended to go and stay there. But, I suppose it's one of the things in life. We always intend to do things. I think we should do them when we want to do them, rather than think, I'll do that next week.
We
We
do
should
some
just get on
spells and he will disappear.
it. So in his old age, he discovered a new passion, which was gardening, of all strange things. And he also developed a new passion, which was for one of his students, Mary Schofield. Whoops, where is she gone?
So he taught people mysticism.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes, yes. And they loved him. They would meet at his house and when he became too old to travel because his legs went, he was just worn out. But for many, many years they were in London and they just all sat around in his living room by the fire and he held court really. And then they would do some work and it was just lovely and cozy. And the warmth they had for him, he seems to have really a real sweet man in lots and lots of ways. So he fell in love again, right, in his ripe old age. Um, in 1933, he married again, and he married Mary Schofield, who seems to be a very pleasant woman. She looks nice. She looks generous-hearted. She looks warm and friendly. She looks decent. And Sybil couldn't bear her
Oh,
because she thought it was obscene. He was 76 when he married her, and it just caused Sybil. She was so jealous of the woman. Her life was absolute misery. She could not bear it. She moved out of the home in a huff when her stepmom moved in, and he said, "All is peaceful at Westfield Cottage. All is dreadful at my supposed home." Which sounds as if they'd been living in sin together before he put a ring on it. So, good for him. Um, so Arthur Edward Waite, a modest, dedicated, clever man who I've lost his photo. Bear with me. Yep, there he is.
he looks a bit
So
like Dr. Watson.
yes, he does. He does.
So,
So it is Arthur Edward Waite, a modest, dedicated, clever man who informed, educated, and shared his knowledge with thousands, also changed the shape of one of the great unrecognized art forms of the 20th century, the tarot cards, and it is $1 billion industry. Pamela Colman Smith, the young artist he chose because he knew she could do it, is a household name thanks to the later publisher who decided to exploit it in every possible way and to make it the Coca-Cola of the tarot world, Stuart Kaplan.
hmm,
That's what he said. That's what he said. He set out to do it and he did it. So millions have altered their lives on the turn of a card, and the forgotten man, Arthur Edward Waite, magician and mystic, was responsible for it all. So there we are. That's the
very,
formal part of the talk.
very
So
lovely.
yeah,
What happened to Doro? To
To Dora, she
Yeah.
stayed married to Mr. Monteith. She knew where her bread was buttered. She wasn't going to give that one up. But they stayed friends. They stayed friends. And the sisters stayed friends. I suppose if you were the daughter of a gardener from North London, you knew that your chances of marrying weren't very many. And if somebody with money wanted to marry you, you couldn't afford to say no.
Yeah.
It was quite simple, but they seem to have had style. They seem to have had personality. They seem to have been bright women, if that may be said. And she
Yeah.
just fitted into the Monteith household.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, thank you for this overview. Um, I wonder whether there are any questions you want to ask Geraldine about what she has been telling us. One question I read just before you got started was whether you in your bookstore have a cat, as it's a magical bookstore.
yes. Give me a moment.
Ah.
We have a little cat, and he is very magical. He's 23 years old, and he's never needed feeding, and he's never grown,
Oh.
and he lives in comfort. He lives on a lovely cushion. See? And we think that he was John Dee's cat in a previous life because He looks so good on that cushion, and that
Yeah,
looks so very Elizabethan.
yeah, it does.
And he's never needed a name. He's never, been bad. He's just an utter delight. So yes, we do have a cat. But
Okay.
we also have a heavy door. So that's why we don't have a real one, as it were. But
Yeah.
we're very fond of our cat.
He has
He
never
moves
pissed.
around the
Yeah.
shop. Yeah.
So somebody says, and he has never pissed off any customer. So
No, well said, well said. He has calmed down some horrible little children over the time,
oh,
but
okay.
yes,
Yeah, I so what I understand from what you were saying is that Arthur E. Waite had two lives, one as a professional worker from a working class background, but
yeah,
then on the other hand, this very intellectual side, this search for mysticism. He was very well read,
very
apparently.
much. And his books were very influential. He wrote, as I say, he wrote over 40 books, but
Yeah,
he wrote endless books as well. People were influenced by him who didn't know his name
yeah,
because who cares who edits things? You just don't put your name, their names don't get on the book usually.
yeah.
So, no, he was very key to lots of things. And because he lived until the 30s, the Golden Dawn people had kind of stopped publishing and it disappeared largely by then and so on. He kept the mystical vibe being very, very, very strong. And when I was in my 30s, I knew some people and they would belong to the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, which is what was one of his strongest occult orders. And they had debated for 17 years whether to let women into it or not, because had been just men for a very, very, very long time. And then they asked a woman who was in her 90s whether she had knew anything about it, whether she'd ever been involved with it. And she said, well, of course I was. I joined in 1937 or whatever it was, you see. So they then decided to let women in.
Very
And
kind.
I had the great privilege of becoming a member of that order.
Wow.
So, yeah, yeah. So I'm as I say, I have a lot to thank him for.
And
Yes.
one more question about the tarot deck.
Yeah.
So it was published in 1909. You told us all about this.
Yeah.
How do you think it remained so popular after his death? Why is this the deck everybody is using now? Do you have an
It was
idea?
accessibility. It was accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 70s, you could, we, my mother and I had the shop then, and we had very few tarot decks. When we got up to 12 tarot decks, it became impossible to show people what we had. So we started putting them into, representative of each deck, started putting them into photograph albums.
Yeah.
And then we got to about 6 photograph albums. And it just went on and on and on from there. And you've got things like the Aquarian deck appeared. There was a boom in it at the time. And it was driven largely by Stuart Kaplan. You know, the first book on the tarot was by Eden Gray, and she was on his dinner party circuit. She was an American actress that
Mm-hmm.
nobody's done much work on. But he was interested in chess and in board games and systems like that. That's how he made his money. And he came over to Europe for a big trade fair
Yeah.
and saw the cards, bought a box of them, 100 in it, whatever. Thought, oh, I'll give them a whirl, see what happens. And it revived an interest because he had the distribution network. And
Yeah.
that's how it all began to happen. And also, it was the time of the hippies. It was the time of people being genuinely interested in all this stuff, and it was the deck that created the revolution that we're is going on now, because it's open. It's a friendly one. It was a modern. It still seems like a modern deck in lots of ways, and especially in the 60s, it did very much then.
So during the time Waite lived, the deck was not so popular,
No,
or was it?
it sold very well. I've got some in the exhibition. I've got some of the keys to the tarot, and one it's gone. The book has got into its 7th 1,000, which, considering how people would hear of things because of a magazine like this, right? The Occult
Yeah.
Review, and it wouldn't have been really advertised anywhere else that I've. It hasn't been advertised anywhere else that I've ever found.
Hmm.
So it was solely on the sales of this and the recommendations
That people bought
of,
it. Yeah.
yeah. And I also don't know where they bought them from, because I don't know if stationers sold those sorts of things. You know, that you could buy a pack of cards because you know, were going on a journey or what. You know, I think that I don't know if they were sold side by side with ordinary playing cards. I don't know where they found them from, other than by mail order through the Occult Review. But I'm sure they must have had other places that they
Yeah.
could get. But you know, one question makes you ask another one, really.
Yeah. So it existed, then Wade died, there was the war,
Yeah.
um, and afterwards, kind of, there was a rekindling of his tarot
Yes.
as well, or their
Because
collaboration.
it was still in print. The Pame version was still in print into 1930s. So
Mm.
that's 20 odd years of tarots. That's of selling a tarot deck. That's not bad going. That's
No,
really impressive.
yeah, it's true. Okay. Um, yeah, for me, I have no questions right now anymore, but I desperately need to have you back for any horny man.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to. Love to.
yeah,
That one's much more orderly. I can do that as a PowerPoint.
yeah,
Yeah.
that,
Can I make a confession? I didn't like the weight deck for many, many, many years. Couldn't connect with it. Didn't like it. Didn't want to know about it. I thought it was simplistic. I thought it was like a cartoon. It was like we had Rupert Bear books as kids over here,
yeah,
and it was so like them. I couldn't take it seriously as a deck. I thought it was a joke. And then having researched Pamela Colman Smith, Rupert Bear and her deck are to do with the Japanese style of art that was became very popular over here. It's to do with the socialist Walter Crane, who, through his children's books, effectively invented the comic strip book. And she was a great friend of his. She was involved in his life. And so her style, and you have the wonderful Tiffany lamps, all these things where the black line, the border, the black border around everything was so trendy. And the Rupert books fit right into that time. But you can see why her cards were like they were. The people she knew, that's the way they drew. That's the way their art looked.
wow,
So, so now I take it extremely seriously. And Bali and I are very privileged to have a Pame deck, and we absolutely treasure it.
yeah.
Very beautiful, very
Um,
lovely.
I really envy you this. And, yeah,
Well,
I'm
come and see
very,
us, and I'll let you handle it. How about
yes,
that?
I come, as you know, I'll be back in October, and
Good.
then we will
Yeah.
have a look together at it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
very
That would
much.
be lovely. That would be good.
So,
Yes.
everybody who's watching or will be watching later, you know now that you have to go to the bookshop Atlantis in London, meet Geraldine, meet Bali, who's also there,
And the
and
cat.
the cat, obviously, the
Yeah.
cat without a name.
Yeah.
And if you want to see their exhibition end of April until end of April, you can watch it. But
Yeah.
otherwise, you can be sure that you can always see great stuff in the in Atlantis whenever you go there. So,
Good.
Geraldine, thank you very much for doing this, even with your cough. This um, this was very difficult for you, I guess, for some time working yourself through this. Um,
My apologies, because it's never pleasant
no,
hearing and
you
seeing
don't
someone
have to
cough.
apologize. I'm so glad you managed to come. And now we have
Yeah.
set everything up, and next time it will be easier. And
Easy. Easy.
exactly,
Yes.
easy peasy. And
Yeah,
let's see when we meet up again. Thank you very
yeah, I look
much.
forward to it. And
Yeah.
thank you for asking me.
Yes. Yeah. Have a great time
Farewell.
and farewell. Speak to you later.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye bye now. Bye bye. Thank you, people.